Welcome back. It is a sad reality that sex trafficking is still happening throughout the world and at an alarming rate. Now, as crazy as this may sound, sex trafficking is happening even right here in Albuquerque. And of course, these predatory criminals have found an easy and vulnerable population to target, that is the homeless youth. Now, we spoke with Shelley Repp. She's the executive director at the New Mexico Dream Center to find out why this is happening and how we as a community can put a stop to it.
Joining us this morning, we have Shelley Repp, the Executive Director with New Mexico Dream Center. Good morning, Shelley.
Good morning, Crystal. It's so good to be here this morning.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us. A very important topic that we're covering this morning because we're talking about human trafficking. Let's first start with, let's talk about human trafficking and the ties to homelessness that you're seeing in New Mexico.
Right. A lot of times people don't realize that homelessness is really something that's tied to human trafficking, specifically homeless youth. I know a lot of times with kind of the national attention around human trafficking, people think about kidnapping, children being kidnapped and then becoming trafficking victims. But really, it's a lot easier for traffickers here in the United States to do that, and specifically with our homeless youth. So if you think about like a homeless teenager, they don't have the resources that an adult homeless person is going to have. There's fewer shelters for them, and there's more barriers because they're underage. Well, traffickers are aware of this. And so some national statistics around this are pretty scary, with Covenant House citing that a homeless teen will be approached by a trafficker within 48 hours of being on the street, which is pretty scary. And that out of the homeless youth population, 1 in 5 will end up in a trafficking relationship or a trafficking situation, and 1 in 3 will live by what's called survival sex, essentially that they will exchange sex for food, shelter, clothing, those kinds of things. So traffickers are absolutely preying on our homeless youth here in Albuquerque and across the United States.
Wow, those are alarming statistics there. Can you tell me if human trafficking is on the rise?
I would say that it is. Now, part of it, when you think about is human trafficking on the rise, for many years, human trafficking was not a crime that people acknowledged or realized was even a crime. And of course, it is definitely hidden as a crime. So it's something that's, kind of under the radar, so to speak. But because we've been able to bring so much awareness in recent years and months and days and weeks, what we're really seeing is a lot more identification. And so what our hopes are is that with that awareness coming, that we will continue to be able to identify this really vulnerable population and provide services to them.
Some New Mexicans may be thinking, when you think of human trafficking, you often think of something that takes place in another foreign country. What constitutes human trafficking here in the U.S.?
So essentially, human trafficking is a trafficker who by force, fraud, or coercion is able to use another person for their benefit. So that can look like sex trafficking. So essentially, somebody who is being controlled, and they don't have to be like held in a basement in chains, but emotionally controlled, physically controlled to do sex acts. So we would say that's sex trafficking. But then that can also happen with labor trafficking. And so we have many cases here in New Mexico as well, where people through force, fraud, or coercion are being held and forced to work with little or no pay as a labor trafficking victim as well.
So why should New Mexicans care? Some of our viewers may be thinking, well, I know where my children are. I know where my family members are. Why should I care?
Everybody should care. And the reason is because human trafficking, one of the reasons I think it's so on the rise right now, Crystal, is because of the social media aspect. It used to be, especially for American children, that a trafficker would have to interact with them many times in person to be able to recruit them, to be able to groom them, and then turn them out as a victim. But nowadays, it's not like that. Here's the deal, Crystal, is that through social media, these traffickers are able to so quickly recruit and develop kind of these false relationships with young, vulnerable, girls and boys, and then end up convincing them to kind of run away with them or leave their homes, and they end up becoming trafficking victims. So to me, that's why it's so important, is that we have to really address what's happening and what our children's presence is online with social media, because there's no knowing the age or the motivation for the people that are talking to them online.
You brought up some great points there, Shelley. Okay, so you tried to pass a House bill last year. It failed. Tell me about the House Bill 237, if you're trying to pass it through again, and what would it do?
So we did try to pass House Bill 237 last year, and it wasn't just me as New Mexico Dream Center, but we're part of the New Mexico Human Trafficking Task Force. So the lead agency on that was the New Mexico Attorney General's office. And so House Bill 237 really was working on increasing penalties of traffickers after they're adjudicated. So after they're identified and they're brought into custody. And, it was really beautiful because it flew through the House. It actually had unanimous approval in the House, but it got stalled out in the Senate. And so what we really want to do is we really want to revisit that this year, because we do feel like it's a great piece of legislation and that it's very passable. We just kind of, it was a short session last year, and we weren't able to get it all the way through. So our hope is this year that will happen. We'll be able to increase those penalties for traffickers, but then also address some areas that are currently unaddressed through legislation in New Mexico, like child brides. Who would have ever thought that children could be married off here in the state of New Mexico? And in fact, we're one of 4 states that doesn't even have a floor to the age that a child can become a bride.
Wow. Shelley, we have 15 seconds left. Give me a website where people can find more information.
All right. So you can go to ours, nmdreamcenter.org, for information, or a great one is the Attorney General's website. So look up the Attorney General. We've got a task force there. Great information on that website.
Shelley, I want to thank you so much for joining us. Some great information.
Thank you.